This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and in this episode 939 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by Underdog. Thanks for tuning in. Before getting into the trends this week, I want to send another reminder that even though you drafted your fantasy teams back in August, you can still do snake drafts right now over on Underdog. Just head to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the Underdog app. In the draft section, click NFL, and you'll see tons and tons of drafts that you can participate in right now. And if you're new to Underdog, make sure you sign up with promo code LATEROUND. That'll get you a nice deposit bonus, as well as my rest of season rankings. Those rankings are updated for you each Tuesday once you get that link to them. But to get them, you have to sign up, use promo code LATEROUND, make a deposit, and start playing. So over Cedric Tillman's last 3 games, his yards per route run rate has been 1.80. That's according to PFF. That's a strong number. It's not elite, but it's strong. And to be clear, this is the split without Amari Cooper. Tillman had a historically bad yards per route run rate as a rookie. It was 0.63. The rookie wide receiver since 2011 to be under that 0.7 yards per route run mark were Xavier Gipson, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Andre Patton, James Washington, and Zay Jones. That's among wideouts with at least 300 routes run as rookies. Now, if you open that up to rookies with rates below 1, so a 1.0 yards per route run rate, you get more players. There are 16 of them, including Tillman. There's only one big hit, and it was Devontae Adams. But I was curious, how many of those players had a high yards per route run rate during year 2? Well, a handful of those 16 were from 2023. They don't have next season data. But the only player from that group who had good yards per route run numbers in year 2, after being kind of miserable in year 1, was James Washington. But even Washington didn't see the uptick that Cedric Tillman has seen from year 1 to year 2, if we assume that he finishes the year with a 1.8 yards per route run rate. Now, make no mistake, I don't think yards per route run is a flawless metric. It's predictive, but there are flaws, including the lack of context of quarterback play, which does matter here. The main point that I want to drive home is that Tillman is pacing without Amari Cooper to do something relatively historic from an efficiency standpoint. I think that he's looked good. He's passed the eye test, but it's going to be interesting to see if this trend keeps up. There's something to monitor with the Tampa Bay backfield. We've kind of seen this annoying split over the last few weeks ever since Sean Tucker had that big breakout against the Saints. For what it's worth, though, against Kansas City, Tucker had a 23% running back rush share. That's his highest since that Saints game. Rashad White played a solid 62% of the team's snaps, but his running back rush share was the exact same at 23%. He's seen that number fall in 3 consecutive weeks. White does appear to be the primary pass-catching back. Tucker isn't running a ton of routes, and then Bucky Irving is just kind of in the middle. But don't let White's double-digit PPR performance totally fool you. His backfield share was not super strong in week 9. Now, in that same game was DeAndre Hopkins, and I have to say, I'm bullish. I'm higher than the market with Hopkins right now. Hopkins had a 21.4% target share against the Bucs. He scored 29 PPR points. That was on a 69% route share, meaning his targets per route run was 26%, which is a very strong number coming from Patrick Mahomes. Now, for context, Rashee Rice was at a 32% targets per route run rate, and he was number 1 in that offense for the offseason and didn't just join the team, and then number 2, a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy football. Now, the difference between Hopkins and Rice is alignment, and obviously age and all these other factors, but alignment is one of the big keys. Hopkins has lined up in the slot on 27% of his routes run for Kansas City. Rashee Rice was over 50% this year. This is why we're able to see Kelce and Hopkins kind of work in unison and not cannibalize each other's workloads. Kelce's had target shares of 34% and 38% over his last 2 games. Those are his 2 highest of the season. Altogether, this DeAndre Hopkins trade was great for fantasy football. Tamm Hill saw his best usage of the season in week 9. He ran a route on 47% of the Saints dropbacks, which was a season high. He had an 18% target share, which was also a season high. And he carried the ball 5 times in that game against Carolina, too. With all the injuries in New Orleans and all the issues that they've been having, I think we're in a spot right now where Hill at least has consideration every single week for your starting lineups. I think Drake May is kind of undervalued in basically every fantasy format. With not a whole lot going on offensively for this Patriots team, May has scored 19.5, 20.8, and 15.7 fantasy points in his completed starts this year. He's now averaging over 50 rushing yards per game. He's doing what we'd want him to do in fantasy football, which is be competent enough through the air while giving us a rushing floor. Now, to be fair, though, May has faced 3 top half matchups during that stretch. And New England quarterbacks have the 6th toughest schedule from here on out. So I'm optimistic about his future. I love what we're seeing from the standpoint of rushing production and how that's translated from college to the NFL. But I'd be more inclined to say that he's a must-have if that schedule looked a little bit nicer rest of season. I went from being higher than the market on Jaden Reed earlier this season to now being lower. I think he's an awesome player. You know that I'm a truther. But he has a target share problem. Reed hasn't hit a 20% target share in a game in 4 straight games. He's actually only been above a 20% target share twice this season. He only has a 17% target share. Now, he can be fantasy relevant because he's going to be efficient with his touches. The dude is a monster. But that's a cap ceiling for fantasy purposes. Not seeing a 20% target share week in and week out, that's going to hurt his fantasy totals. Now, a big reason for this is because the Packers are allowing him to run a route on fewer than 80% of the team's dropbacks. He was at a route participation of 67% 2 weeks ago. It was 79% this past week. We'd get more stability if that were to rise. But given his role in this offense, I don't think it's going to rise here in 2024. So you need that efficiency to really pay off. I think some people are a little bit turned off by Tyrone Tracy's usage in week 9, but you shouldn't be. Not only was he coming off a concussion where he didn't really practice last week, but his running back rush share was still 70%. His snap share was 69%. Devin Singletary was at 31%. We're probably not going to see like super elite backfield share numbers from Tracy this year. To be an RB2 though, that kind of usage is fine. I'm still high on him rest of season. The schedule, like I talked about in the 15 transactions episode, it's really good for the passing attack, but that should help Tyrone Tracy too. Gavon Sanders has been producing, and not many people are talking about it. He's been a top 14 weekly tight end in PPR scoring in 3 of his last 4. He's seen target shares of 15%, 19%, 35%, 3%, and 21% over his last 5. In 2 of his last 3 games, he's hit receiving yard totals of 61 and 87. Tommy Tremble has been inactive with a back injury. If that continues, Sanders is definitely in streaming territory. Now, another kind of deeper tight end to keep your eyes on is A.J. Barner. Noah Fant's going to be out for some time with a groin injury, and A.J. Barner, a rookie, stepped in this past week. He had a route participation of 86%. For some context, just given the fact that there's more competition around when Fant has been active, Fant's high this year in route participation has been 81%. Barner finished the day with a 21% target share. So as long as Fant is out, Barner's going to probably be Seattle's top tight end target. He may not have as high of a target share ceiling each week because DK Metcalf will eventually be back, but it's still a name to watch, especially in deeper formats. And for the record, Seattle does have a bye this week. The last trend this week, I'm going to go back to the Chiefs. I adjust fantasy points allowed by strength of opponent. That's why I say adjusted fantasy points allowed all the time on the show. I look at how a team is performing in terms of raw points allowed, and then I adjust that number based on who they've actually played. Guys, Kansas City has been absolutely unbelievable against running backs this year, by my math. Team running backs are scoring 9.4 fewer points against the Chiefs than they do in an average matchup. Carolina, meanwhile, is on the opposite side of that list. They allow 8.6 more points to be scored. That means that a team going from playing the Chiefs to the Panthers would expect their team running backs to see an 18-point swing. Again, that's team running backs, not individual running backs. But the Chiefs are over 5 points per game better than any other team right now. It's an impossibly difficult matchup. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you yet subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Late Round QB. And make sure you check out the Late Round Fantasy Football YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@LateRoundFF. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'll talk to you tomorrow with the Weekly Sleeper Show.